Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Mastering Dungeons, your favorite role playing tabletop game news, design stuff. I'm Shawn Merwin here with Teos Abadia. Hey, Teos, how's it going?
It's going great because this weekend brought victory of Duke over the Tar Heels, our hated rivals. I mean, not really. I mean, like my best friend goes there, but anyway, uh, we it was a big game. We dominated. It was great. And so this Mike Shea segment, I just want to say, go Duke. And then I got the new Monster Manual and the other cover. Someone said that showing off covers is like the new influencer thing where you show off your Lamborghini and champagne. And I said, boy, I wish those things cost what a Monster Manual costs. But I'm glad to show them off. They're cool. I like them.
I have no Monster Manual to show off, no Lamborghini, no champagne, but I do have a podcast.
Yes.
And this podcast, its two hosts are going to Winter Fantasy. I leave. All of those are recording in 2 days, or the day of the recording when it drops. I will be on the road, so hopefully we will see some folks, some listeners there. And when we come back, I'm sure we will have tales to tell.
Yeah, I had some flakes this morning. In fact, just like 20 minutes ago. And so I think it's telling me that it's the time to migrate to Winter Fantasy for tons and tons of gaming. I'm excited to play a bunch of Dragonlance. And then some Grim Hollow.
Ooh, yes. The couple of Grim Hollow preview adventures will be there. One regular adventure and one epic. So I'm looking forward to seeing how those go. I apparently will be overseeing the running of the epic, which happens twice. So looking forward to doing that along with my friend and co-conspirator on that, Joe Rosso.
Awesome.
And we'll talk more about it when we get back. We'll have much more to say, but safe travels to everybody heading to lovely Fort Wayne, Indiana in February. Shouldn't be terrible, maybe a little icy at times because it's right at that wrong temperature, but we'll see.
Yeah, I don't see snow in the forecast, so that's something.
Yep. And what else we'll see there, hopefully, are some listeners. And listeners have been sending their stuff to us. So here we go with our listener corner, starting with Tim Hibbets via our Patreon. Hi, I was hoping you'd cover these in the TTRPG career section, but I would love to know the details of what a TTRPG editor and art director really do. Thanks. So we've talked about like the industry before, and so I think this is what Tim is referring to, and we may have done a little bit of glossing over. So let's take a moment to step through some of these positions, talk about what they do and how it may differ from company to company or project to project. Sound good?
Yeah, I love it.
Okay, here we go. So let's take a sort of larger company. We'll say, a medium-sized company that works on projects that involve publishing multiple books at one time. So we'll go kind of large here.
Yeah.
To cover the full range. So first, I'll do this sort of like a process. So when the book is being created, there's a bunch of planning that goes on, obviously, and then the writing begins. So let's start with when the writing begins. The writing begins with the designers. The designers are the people who do the writing on the book. That design may be rules. It could be lore. It could be narrative. It could be adventures. But that one-term designer covers a lot of things. If you are doing a large book, you may have multiple designers working on the book. So therefore, there will be a lead designer. The lead designer stands in for all of the other designers in this process and collects the designer's work when they're done, and hopefully will review it and make sure it's good before it goes on to the next step in the process. Now, the lead designer may be a designer who does part of the book and then collects the others. It may be somebody who doesn't actually do the design of the original, but takes it in and covers the text that comes in.
Make sure it
Some
meets those standards and approaches that the company uses. Yep.
exactly. Now, sometimes a company or a project may differentiate between a designer and a writer. Whereas a designer will be the one designing rules, the writer may be doing the text that's, adventure design, narrative design, and so on. Sometimes there's a differentiation, sometimes there's not. But if there are many writers, then there may be a lead writer who acts the same way that a lead designer would, only for the writing. Cool. So we've got text coming in. Once that text gets in and it passes through all the design team, it will often go to a developer. The difference between those is the designer is doing the initial writing and the developer is taking it and looking at it, generally looking at it in terms of rules. So they're generally looking to make sure that the design of the rules or the design of the content that touches the rules works for what this project is meant to do.
Yeah, and I would take it a step further that you can have development on something like adventures, and then you're looking at it again, kind of like you're saying, it's not the micro of this sentence, but more like you were trying to let's say something like you were trying to create an adventure that was about the apocalypse, but the apocalypse ended halfway through the adventure. Is that really what you're trying to do here? Maybe we need to rethink this. You're kind of done halfway through. Maybe we should work on this a bit and refine it.
Right, for sure. So in any of these, there may be overlap, there may be something missing, but that's generally what a developer does. So the developer takes it, looks at it. If the development of it meets the criteria, doesn't meet the criteria, they will hand it back to the design team. If it's okay, if it's good enough to go along, then it generally passes on to an editor. Now, you may have a lead developer, again, who takes all the development from a team, puts it into one pile, and goes over it, but it will then go to an editor. So the editor will then review it in whatever terms that editor has been told to review. Sometimes there is no developer, the editor will act as a developer. Sometimes if there has been a development pass done on it, the editor will just edit it for grammar, for readability, for clarity, and so on. If there are many editors working on a book, there may be a lead editor who takes the work from all the different editors into one pile and then make sure those editors did what they were supposed to do with the text. So that's the three steps I sort of came up through the industry learning about.
Yeah, and that editing can be very like all you do is grammar, or all you do is look at the overall flow of things. It can really vary, but often for major companies, it is still one or two people who are doing it. And I'll say one of the tricks here is doing things in the right process, right? Because if, for example, you suddenly have someone step in, even if they're not the developer, but act like the developer after it's been edited and make a bunch of changes, now it has to go back to editing, right? And similarly, if a writer were to come in and do something, but it hasn't been developed, then it might not be upholding the vision of that product anymore, and it really needs to be developed and edited. And so if you think of various cases where we've had like, how did this end up happening in a book? This thing shouldn't have been here. It's problematic content or any number of issues. Well, probably those steps were skipped or jumbled up.
Yep. I'm going to throw in now a term called producer. I could as easily say project manager here, because generally a producer's job is to possibly take on some of the other roles on a smaller project, but they are the ones that make sure the text is getting completed on time and on budget. Sometimes you'll hear the term managing editor, which throws another level of confusion in it. But in my experience, the managing editor is generally more in the producer role than an editor role, although they may have some editing responsibilities as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will also throw in here something like consultant, sensitivity reader, that sort of thing. They take on more of an editor role, but on a very specific basis. They are not generally looking at grammar. They are not looking
Mhm.
at rules. They are not looking at that. They are looking in that area of their own expertise, which is, whatever topic that they are an expert in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now we've got hopefully a text that has been written, developed, edited, and then off to the side sometimes is the art director. And it's not like the art director steps in now, right? The art director will be working alongside this whole process
Mhm.
to act as a liaison between the production team and the artists that are creating the art for the project. At some Most of the project I've worked at, the art director has gotten a look at the manuscript along the way. Sometimes they read pieces of the manuscript to pull out text that will act as an art order,
Mhm.
or they will create an art order based on that text. Sometimes they will wait for an art order to be created by someone in the process, whether that's a writer or a designer or a developer or an editor. And often it happens all along the way
Mhm.
where we will have, okay, we need this amount of art to start with. Good, we've got that done. Now we'll get some art here. All right, now the text is done. Give me some more so I can get more art in.
Yeah,
And a
and
lot of,
that
yeah,
that process between art director and project manager is really critical the bigger you get, right? And
yeah,
the
yeah.
type of product. So if you're doing a monster manual, you need basically one art per monster,
Mhm,
depending on your budget, what you can pull off. But that's, sort of what you'd like to have. And so
mhm,
in that case, you actually need really strict control over the word count. This all monsters are one page or a half page, whatever your standard is, or you set it up. Here are the list of monsters, and this is how many pages we're budgeting for each. And
mhm.
the art director needs to get going now to procure all that art because there's so much art that needs to go through all this process. Your art director's got to be going just about on day one. Like once you've got that outline of what you're doing, and it's all and then the producer must ensure everybody's on track, everybody's keeping to the schedule so that it all comes together, right?
Now, art will also depend on where on the page or how much of the page is taken up. So
Yeah.
if you have a two-column layout and you're going to have one half, like one quarter of a column or one whole column with a piece of art, that art will be made differently than if it was a horizontal half page piece, right?
Mhm.
So, yep, Teos is holding up sort of a half page horizontal piece. So you also need to know how many words are going to be on a page, especially in an art intensive book like a monster book, to to get it right without having to do a major rewrite. Yep, Teos is holding up a book with a half page vertical column piece of art. So it's a very interesting process. It's very time consuming, and you know, God bless art directors because they have to work with a lot of different folks, and often they're not getting the information they need at the right time because of
Mhm.
we terrible editors, designers, developers. So good job. Now, if God bless art directors, God double bless graphic designers and layout people because they then take the text and the art and they put it together into a finished product, overseeing the look and feel of the book, and or if it's other parts of a project, maybe cards, right? If you have monster cards that go with your
Mhm.
project, if you have a DM screen, they are the ones that are doing the look and the feel, the graphics, and the layout for those things. And it's often a thing where they'll have a piece of art, they'll have the text, they'll lay it out, and they'll realize we have too much or we have too little. And then it has to go back to the producer, who then might send it back to an editor, who might send it back to a developer to add some text or subtract some text, which then means, uh-oh, we're adding more text. We have to go back now through development, editing,
Yeah.
and the whole process. And if you fail to do that, as we have seen in projects, and as Teos mentioned earlier,
Mm-hmm.
you may run into some difficulties
Yeah.
if something doesn't quite click in the writer's mind. You could get some problematic material. So it is a big, long, especially for like I'm working on right now, basically 2.5 books worth of content that is all over this process, chapter by chapter by chapter by chapter. So yeah, it is a thing. I'm sure I forgot some stuff. Teos, is there anything I didn't uh, cover?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I saw your list and I was very impressed. It's really good. This is a topic that Scott Gray and I have been thinking about covering in the future,
Mhm.
to do like a little video on how a book is made, and then this touches a lot of this. This is kind of nice. What's my appetite for that?
Mhm. Yeah. The big problem, the big hurdle is there needs to be somebody overseeing all of this. There needs to be one person,
Well,
or
yeah,
if it's multiple people, they have to be very much in sync to make sure everything is coming together text wise, rules wise, business wise, art wise, layout wise,
yeah.
or you end up with issues.
So two thoughts that are we didn't mention but are pretty critical. One is marketing.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's not, we tend to make fun of marketing, sort of the evil entity and so on, and they do things like say you must put your Baldur's Gate and your Avernus Adventure and things like that. But
Mhm.
um, it's not without reason, right? It's because, well, we expected this video game to come out way back then, and so having a tie-in at that time would have been so perfect if actually the video game company had hit their schedule and it all had worked out, right? Or things that were done around the movie. I heard things about the movie that was an entirely different D&D movie that they were trying to do tie-ins, but well, let's just go ahead and get this done because it's not going to work. So just plans change, but marketing's trying to make the most out of those things, and the more that things are moving around, well, you end up doing things for what later seems like no reason at all. When it's pulled off, it's great, right?
Yeah. Or a Kickstarter, right? You get
Yeah.
a Kickstarter and you have your books planned, and suddenly you do better than you thought, and they add stretch goals. And let's say, for example, for a Grim Hollow revisited Grim Hollow Transform project, where we did well, and we asked the backers, "Hey, here's a list of 5 things. You choose what you want." And a certain designer slash developer slash editor slash producer type person might be praying that they choose this one thing because you already have that done and it fits well in
Yeah.
the book. But no, the players choose something else, which,
Hide the results. You chose this
yeah,
thing. Good job.
yeah, no, our marketing team is honest, and they
Fools.
they did the
Yeah.
they voted the way that was the hardest.
The other one
So
here is that usually there's somebody at a very large company that's in charge of the whole print and distribution, shipping
sure,
type thing. And so if you
yep,
think about there's a release date, whether it's a Kickstarter date or it's a two stores date or whatever, and the bigger you are, I mean, Wizards has to deal with this, and it's a nightmare, right? Trying to get that many books printed and stuff. You need special agreements with very special printers and multiple
hmm
points of entry in multiple countries, even. But even at a smaller level, that timing that's a real challenge. And so somebody who knows, okay, you're going to get me these print file ready at this date so that I can get it to the shipper. The
hmm
shipper is ready to print. They'll save us
yep,
that window. It'll all come out. That is a very tough job too, because of course, everybody's going to want to say, oh, I'm sure they can find another date. And it's like,
yep,
no, right? And then the things like, well, if we wait too long, the price of shipping changes and our whole
yep,
profit margin shifts and any number of
yep,
things like that. And so those people are all hugely important as well in the scheme of things.
yeah. I learned the importance of Lunar New Year a couple years ago,
Yeah.
and how that affects. shipping and Kickstarters and
Printing in China.
production. Yep.
Yeah.
And yeah, so yeah, Simon at Ghostfire is our sort of production manager who handles the cards and the minis and all the knickknacks and all the great stuff. And right, yeah,
Yep.
he's also, God bless
Yeah.
those folks. So
And Shawn, it is the year of the snake, so watch out for Cobra Command. That's all I'm saying.
I always do. Speaking of interesting NPCs, Graham Ward via our Patreon Discord asks, what are some good resources and methods for infusing interesting NPCs and social interaction if you're not running a published adventure or you're running one that doesn't support that aspect of play? For me, the key term there are interesting NPCs and social interaction, because that's dependent really on the game you're playing, the story that you're telling in the game, and then the experience you want to promote at the table. Uh, so therefore, I started thinking about resources. I'm like, well, that resource might work if you're running like a sword and sorcery sort of game.
Mm.
But if you're running Knights Black Agents or Top Secret or Spycraft, that's a whole different sort of, you have different resources. So what I have figured is I figure out what experience do I want, what game am I trying to play, what game elements do I want to highlight, and then experience and what story is coming out of those game elements in the experience. So like for experience, before I look for resources, I ask myself, do I want the players in this social interaction with these NPCs? Do I want them to think?
Mm-hmm.
Do I want them to act as in acting? Do I want them to talk? And then I will look for the resources that will do those things. So if I'm running a super spy game, my resources are going to watch James Bond, John le Carré, the Bourne movies, right? I'm doing
Mission
that.
Impossible.
Mission Impossible. That's where the story is, and that's where I can take a cue of the experience that the players will have and what I want to bring out in that game. If it was a fantasy thing, I might go Conan and right, Game of Thrones, and if I have a sort of darker, more intriguey type, and just work from those resources because those are the experience that the players have. And so that's where, rather than going in a more, even for me, this is hard to say, a more academic route, I'm just going straight to the story and pulling stuff from there.
I think you're on to the right of it. What I find is most useful at the table when I'm coming up with an NPC is separating whether this is a main NPC that they need to deal with a lot, like it's going to come up often, or is this just sort of like a fun burst of something, right? The interesting villager, the quirky person at the tavern, something like that. And to me, that's two different modes, because the more quirky, gimmicky, fun, that's more of a flash pan experience, flash in the pan. And so you just want to have something that captures imagination and is interesting. And you can still go to the same places, but you're doing it a little differently, right? So you can pull someone from a movie or something like that, or a novel, and that can be good inspiration. But you really are just sort of trying to communicate, trying to create something that they will play off of. And so really what I'm doing with that method-wise is thinking of what's needed for the scene to facilitate, to interact between players and the scene, right? In this tavern, they need to accomplish the following things, right? They need to pick up these 2 clues. So what is an NPC that can be fun to interact with that can help them get towards those clues, but only when they interact, right? So, and what's the type of interaction? Well, the interaction has to be around, what the sea is like this time of year and what dangers are there. And who knows what else, right? And some demand of the players. And so that kind of back and forth, that's the method that I'm using of making it interesting and fun and quirky. The more that an NPC is going to be around, then I need, especially across sessions, I need to be able to track it. And that's where it's really easy to do. Something I've always done for years, but is also in Mike Shea's advice, is that idea of taking something from a novel, TV show, whatever, and changing it in some way or mashing it or pulling an aspect and then into whatever your NPC vision is. And so it's things like, um, like I played a character recently, but it could have been a non-player character that was based on Ho from Slow Horses, right? This like super into himself, thinks he's just the gift to God's gift to everybody, not just women,
Mm-hmm.
and above the fray, and so being able to understand who they are, right? That's my method, is find something that helps you do to really understand who they are, so that across the sessions you can keep doing that. Even if the minor bits, you might not quite always get your accent or your quotes right. You can do a lot of techniques around that too, but you know who they are. You understand who they are, their motives, their goals, their way of operating. And resource wise, one thing that I find is very helpful is things like Paizo has the Harrow deck. Blade Runner has cards that are included in the intro adventures, but a picture of your NPC goes a long way. Shadowrun had great NPC contacts in their books, so that you could use these really neat. That also helps you too, because the mental image, depending on how your brain works, but at least for me, that mental image really helps me remember who this person is and who I'm portraying to the characters or the players. And the players see that visually as well, right? It's this grimy fixer that's always in their shop, tinkering with stuff, right? And seeing the art that kind of shows that just sells itself, right?
Yeah. One thing I did when I was trying to answer this question was I went to the internet and I Googled 100 character archetypes just to see what resources were out there. This was on the first page: 201, 77, 99, D100, 100, over 325, 250, 230, or 50 character archetypes for the following: screenplays, writers, screenwriters, novelists, writers, right? So you can go out, you could just do that, go to any one of those websites, and you're going to see at least 50 and up to 325 character archetypes, which you could grab or mash together.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
it's a
Folks who want
resource.
to think, who kind of peer into my brain of how I approach NPCs and scenes, can take a look at Acquisitions Incorporated. The chapter, I think it's either 3 or 4 of the adventure, where you go to Luskan. And I have a couple of scenes there with NPCs, and you can really see how I approach it through the design that we did there. Especially when you go to the tavern, that you need to get some clues in that tavern, and you can see the sort of bizarre type of characters I do that are more of that flash in the pan approach, that are meant to be interesting, right? You're missing a finger, and here's the stuff you're saying, and even the guy at the door is like, the guard is a bumbling fool who you can easily talk into giving you information, right? It's those kinds of, that's what I look for, and what I tend to do. And so if you want to know how my brain works, just read that section and you'll get a full dossier on my approach to NPCs.
Yep. So thank you for those questions. We will have more next time. Jumping right into news and commentary, let's start with no news being good news regarding the D&D movie and television show. We had Jess Lanzillo commenting on the possibility of more D&D movies, shows, and other media with EN World's Christian Hoffer. And by the way, Christian going to EN World is amazing. EN World has never been better in terms of reporting and getting in-depth, accurate information. So excellent hire there, and good job, Christian, and everyone working there.
Whatever he's getting paid, double it.
Yep. What Jess said was, after I joined the D&D team at the end of Q1 2024, we kind of reestablished our relationship with a lot of studios and partners. And we're doing a lot of exploration. We basically have aligned our philosophy, so we want to pair up with the best creators and let them tell the best stories that they already know how to do, because all of these people started telling stories through playing D&D. And through that, there are a series of explorations that we are very, very excited about. When we are ready to announce them, we will let you know.
There's a lot of potential there in what she is saying.
Yeah, and that's sort of we see the cyclical nature of this, right? We see we Hasbro are going to buy an entertainment studio,
To
and we
do it
are
all
going to make
ourselves.
movies and TV shows because we're going to make so much money with that. And then the D&D movie comes out. Great directorial team, great writing,
Yeah.
great acting,
Fantastic.
everything about it fantastic.
I could
I
watch it again
don't
right
think
now.
I don't think they could have done better
Mm-hmm.
on getting that movie out.
Yeah.
And still, it didn't explode like they were hoping.
You
What
know,
happens?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just seeing, our friend who's always covering the D&D movie was saying that it may now fall out of being in the top 10 in a country, in like its last country. It
Mhm.
almost made it 2 entire years of being in the top 10 in streaming or, in something somewhere. And
Mhm.
it's done really well. Like, I know it didn't do the box office they wanted at the time when no other movie was also doing the box office it wanted. So, but
Right.
I'll tell you what drives me nuts, Shawn, is that what I'm hearing is, oh, we're going to license out any D&D movies or TV shows.
Yeah.
And the reason we didn't have a good D&D movie for such a long time was because they had given it the license to a company that then gave it to another company, and that company was either going to sit on it forever, or as
Mhm.
it started losing the ability to hold on to his license, was going to make the worst, cheapest D&D movie possible just to renew the license. And
Yeah.
Hasbro had to sue slash give money to this entity, and I think it was like part of CBS or something. I can't even remember. We'd have to go back and look at our show notes, but they had to sue and pay off this group to get the license back, so that then something like 5 or 6 years could go by and we could end up with a movie we got. It's
Right.
such a long, torturous process, and we're just starting the cycle all over again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I hope they learn from those previous mistakes. It's
Mhm.
fine to go back to licensing, but boy, you need that and get it out there, right? Because what I do know is the D&D movie was great for getting the brand name out there. Did you make money on the movie itself? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Probably used it as a way to sock in losses, and it was great for you anyway. But
Mhm.
please make another. Don't wait forever, right? Like,
Right. Well, and that's what I was going to continue is
sorry.
that they no, but they went off and they made, with partners obviously, but they made the movie
Yeah.
thinking we will reap most of the benefits and
Hmm.
didn't. But they partnered with with a computer game company and had a smash success. So with that smash success and with the failure of the movie over here, failure in quotes, they're like, oh, now we're going to switch. Now we're going to
Yeah.
license out movies,
Uh-huh.
but we're going to make video games. And what's likely to happen? Likely some licensed TV show, movie, entertainment thing will do great again.
And
And
they'll.
all of the video games they put out will underperform. And then they'll say, oh, wait, look, we could
Mhm.
be making, and then they'll switch. And that's just the cycle that this whole
Mm.
industry, it perpetuates.
It's so
And
beautiful to watch the
yeah,
sausage being made.
right. And I'm completely cool with what Jess says here, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You, you,
True.
you never can predict the future.
Yeah.
So you just try to find the best plan with the best partners that you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
and hope for the best. Any other thoughts on that bit of news there?
Um, just tagging into the idea of licensing and games and things. There was Wizards of the Coast shared an upcoming game called Battlemarked or Marked Battlemarked
Battle marked.
Marked,
Yep.
and typo in my show notes. Thank you. Which uses the Demeo system for creating a cross-platform online tabletop kind of gaming experience. You and your buddies show up as tokens on this map. It's all kind of 3D-ish and glowing, kind of pretty dungeon-looking map, and you can go over to the chest and you get cards in it, and those cards give you powers, and you roll special dice to come up with things. And so they're doing a D&D version of that. There was a trailer about it. You can check it out. We'll see how that does. But, just another example of sort of somebody has a system, they're doing games, and they want the D&D name for it, sure, you get that licensed.
There you go. We'll talk more about licensed games next week. But now we want to talk about Wizards of the Coast announcing 2 new 2025 books while we blinked and missed it. They announced first Eberron Forge of the Artificer in August of 2025, which will include the revised Artificer class, new backgrounds and feats, a new revised Eberron species, including the Changeling, Kalishtar, Warforged, and Shifter, along with the new Koravar species, which are considered new species and distinct from half-elves, which I assume referred to what they sort of were in previous iterations of the game.
And Crawford had an explanation of like, looking at the lore, they've said they aren't half-elves, and so we, of course, are perfectly capturing this now. And sure, 5 editions from now, we'll have an entirely different way of looking at it. But, fine. Yeah. Okay, so, one more species that are different. And given that half-elves are being pulled out, well, that makes sense to not have them be half-elves. So.
That's right. New Bastion options for Eberron, expanded rules for airships, dragon-marked houses.
Wait. Are we going to see the ship combat that Spelljammer never delivered? I want to know.
Well, hopefully. Dragon-marked houses will now be feats and no longer locked into species, opening up memberships that characters can join during their adventuring career. There is no campaign planned as far as we know, but we do get 3 chapters on Sharn Inquisitives, Dragon-marked Intrigue, and Moorgrave Expeditions presented as campaign options with sample adventures. What else do we know about this, Teos?
They mentioned that they are using the Dungeon Master's Guide organizational approach for adventures and include several sample adventures. And I found that really interesting because I don't know that we've seen the DMG's, kind of half-page adventures thing receive amazing praise. Like, I think people have said, yeah, this is great to sort of show what your paper notes might look like. But is that a format we wanted to see emulated? And this is the first of 2 products we're being told that this will be the approach to it. And along with this comes the announcement that they're experimenting with a different page count and price point. Sounded like lower, but details were not given. And so maybe the idea is this is going to be like a much leaner offering, like a mini book, a half book, something like that. And that's why you're not getting adventures, you're getting like outlines of things you could flesh out and run. It's not a bad idea, but it'll be interesting to see how much that captivates people. If you look at the Eberron book, it had a bigger page count than most books, the original Last War. And a lot of people will say it's one of the best setting books 5th edition has had because it has so much coverage to it, from an adventure experience to the setting, to the player side, all of that.
Mm-hmm. The team will include James Wyatt, who worked on the original Eberron line, and the original Eberron designer, Keith Baker, will be consulting on the new book.
Interesting.
Whatever that means. Yep.
Yeah.
So there's book 1. Book 2, we have a little less information on. It is coming in October, and it is simply called the Unnamed Mystery Book.
Yeah.
And I assume that means it has mysteries in it, not that it is a mystery in and of itself, although it is a mystery in and of itself. Yeah. So we will keep an eye and our ear to the ground for any information on that. Now, just a quick reminder of what else is coming out in 2025. In July, we have Dragon Delves, 10 short adventure anthologies, each tied to a different chromatic or metallic dragon. We have September bringing us Heroes of the Borderlands starter set, set in the Keep on the Borderlands world, but after time has passed.
Yeah, and can I add just 2 things? The Dragon Delves is also using this 2024 DMG approach of short type prep style adventures. So that's kind of fascinating there for these 10 short anthologies, that they're not like full-fledged adventures, apparently. Also, they're doing an art style of each anthology has its own art style. I think that's a neat idea. For this Heroes of the Borderlands set, they're playing with components and trying to, I think, sell you on the components that are in it. So like tiles that you mix and match to create characters, which is an idea we've bandied about on the show. Like if you have a pre-gen and you have, insert either block A or block B for your skills, and insert block C or D for your, choice of subclass or whatever, right? And so they're saying this is the quickest and character creation system ever for new players. So we'll see how that goes.
That is needed. So I hope that works well.
Yep.
We have 2 books in November, both set in the Forgotten Realms, the Forgotten Realms Player's Guide and the Forgotten Realms Adventure Guide. The Player's Guide will include new ways to cast spells, new subclasses. In fact, they are likely going to have subclasses that we are going to talk about in our main segment today as we look at the Unearthed Arcana. The Forgotten Realms Adventures Guide will focus on 5 regions of the realms: the Moonshine Isles, Icewind Dale, the Dale Lands, Calimshan, and Baldur's Gate. There will be short adventures for DMs to run or help launch a campaign in each of the other areas. And some of the areas have been updated with new information according to what we've heard.
Yeah.
So any other news you want to delve into?
Yeah, just the GeekWire, Polygon, and Screen Rant all had articles. GeekWire had some interesting pieces there where it talked about how now that sort of Jeremy Crawford has a slightly, I think, elevated role, and Perkins shifts over to sort of world creation, and that this allows them to reestablish a world building environment with the idea that they could create new settings. So that'll be interesting to see whether that comes out. And it wasn't just necessarily settings, but sort of new experiences, new, beyond the idea of revisiting the past and having like an old setting book or something like that. They talked about bringing in Baldur's Gate 3 aspects to that Baldur's Gate section of the adventure guide, but also they were saying that all of the experience of Baldur's Gate 3 and appeal of it was, according to Jeremy Crawford, brought in as the idea of having micro settings, various disparate locations that are still technically on the same world, but which are different enough to serve as the home for entirely different styles of the D&D game. And this apparently came from the reactions to Baldur's Gate 3, which I thought was really interesting.
Awesome.
The virtual tabletop came up. Do we want to just quickly touch on that?
Go for it.
All right. So GeekWire talked about how Sigil has been a little quiet, but that they did get to test it, look at it. And there are a couple of things that I thought were interesting here. They said is intended as many things: a world-building tool, a visual aid, a hook for your imagination. But according to Cale Stutzman, the director of the game, it isn't necessarily a virtual tabletop. And that they quietly tested it at a recent PAX Unplugged. And there, that people said the more that it tried to automate Dungeons & Dragons, the less people seemed to like it. That influenced an evolution of the tool from a sort of virtual D&D companion into an easy-to-use 3D map builder. So I thought there's a little bit more here that folks can read in our show notes if you're a Patreon supporter. But that to me is interesting. I felt like maybe the fact that it's being a little quiet, it involves a shift in approach. Mm-hmm. And this seems to suggest that's true. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep an eye on that, especially as they partner with other virtual tabletop type apps and so on. Do you want to talk about this providing new settings?
We kind of touched on that, but very quickly that they do seem to suggest that there will be new campaign settings coming out. Because of the way that they've changed up Jeremy Crawford being game director and Chris Perkins creative director. But it's interesting to me that this seems to be a big push on their end, right? There's something going on here within Wizards, reading between the various quotes and lines. Something's going on with their idea of how they envision settings and what will be built in the future. And so I wonder if it's something a little more like we saw with that video game that has its own role-playing game, whether they're going to try to do some sort of tie-ins and larger things that will be new, but maybe cross-media in some way. So it'll be interesting to see what comes from here. There's going to be something different than just saying like, oh, we made the next Eberron, right? It feels like there's something beyond that coming here. I also note that there are new, and I'd like pause and step back, Shawn, like,
Mhm.
I was not expecting that the week that the Monster Manual is in gaming stores, all this news would distract from the Monster Manual. Like you and I would have been
Yeah.
talking about the Monster Manual, and we're talking about
Right.
all this other. Shouldn't they have waited at least one more week? But yeah, the other thing they said was there's a new Fallbacks novel. I really enjoyed reading
Mhm.
the first one. It was a copy was provided me, but it was absolutely great. I've given it on to someone to enjoy with their family. So there's going to be another one. I look forward to. I think that could be the basis of a great TV show or movie if they wanted to make something that has wide appeal. Really nice set of characters there.
Okay. We talked briefly a while ago about Universal Fan Fest nights having a D&D themed night, and now you can buy tickets. The official page is up at universalstudioshollywood.com. The Universal Fan Fest D&D nights will run from April 25th through May 18th. And so you can check out, link in the show notes to see what's going on with all of that. Jumping quickly to our creator corner, we're starting with Ethan Yen launching the game Prequel. Yeah. So you are the first group of heroes that have reached the evil that rules over the realm. The quest was difficult and full of sacrifice. Despite all this, victory will not meet you. However, the heroes who come after you may still have a chance, provided you can pave the way. So, what do you do in this game? You fail,
Yeah.
but you are not the end. So, you fight the evil in a multi phase tactical boss fight. You can world build as you fight,
Mm.
constructing a timeline of the hero's quest, and you forge your legacy by discovering the evil's weaknesses and the hero's burdens. It's perfect for a one shot or an introduction to a D&D campaign that you are about to run.
Yeah, this is so cool. A number of
Yeah.
folks in our Discord played samples of this, I think, at Gamehole and
Mhm.
preview of this, and really loved it. And everything Ethan does just seems to be fantastic. I know you've
Yeah.
tried out a couple things, and so I absolutely, yeah, yeah, I am absolutely good. Shawn is holding up "Fetch My Blade." Um, so I'm absolutely getting this. It just sounds really cool. This idea of collaborative flashback creation and paving the way for the future heroes that are going to come and learning about what you did. That sounds like the kind of thing that can be a really fun evening of gaming. It's only $10 for the PDF, 20 for print. Yeah, seems amazing.
Indeed. Also amazing is punching Nazis. And
Yeah.
there's a bundle of holding that will let you do that time after time after time through a
Keep punching.
series of games. That's right. So our listeners shared with us this bundle of holding filled with anti-authoritarian tabletop RPGs. Perfect time to break out one of these games like Apocalypse Frame, Gray Ranks, Misspent Youth, Eat the Reich, and many more. As usual, the bundle comes at various levels so you can get the best deal for you. And as of this recording, you have about a week left to get this bundle at bundleofholding.com/presents/resistance.
This next story was one that I was kind of really struck by when I read it. Jared Rascher saying he's hanging up his review hat. And I would absolutely encourage folks to go to whatdoiknowjr.com and read this latest post on changing times. He reflects on how he's been writing reviews basically since the 3.5 era onward, and how much energy it takes out of him and the mental health thinking he's done around this, and deciding to kind of step back. So I wish him, I know you do too, just,
Mhm.
a lot of recovery. And we give him huge thanks for
Yeah.
all of the incredible reviews. I mean, talk about above and beyond, just incredible reviews of products covering all kinds of areas of our hobby, and just incredible. So, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for all your work, Jared. So insightful, so precise,
Yeah.
so well tuned into the gaming world.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
take some deep
Constructive.
breaths.
Fantastic.
Yeah, you've earned your piece.
Mm-hmm.
And last but not least, listener Sasha Morlock has shared that author Brandon Sanderson has started his professional writing lecture for sci-fi and fantasy novels at BYU. These were recorded back in 2020, but there will be new ones for 2025. What do you know about these lectures, Teos?
Yeah, I haven't checked them out yet, but we really appreciated Sasha reaching out to us via Mastodon with these. And Sasha pointed out that there are 3 videos up right now. Every Friday, there's a new video. And the second one about promise, progress, and payoff, he said, Sasha said, is especially useful. So thanks for that tip. That's great. And these are going to go on my list of things to check out.
There you go. Whew. That was a lot of news and a lot of commentary.